Hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to Centaur Biomechanics and welcome to this live session where we are going to be discussing anything related around bridle, fit, nosebands, horse bridle interaction. As you may have been following us on this past few days, we've been having Noseband Week, and where we've been covering a range of topics associated with the noseband. We started off on Monday, what is the function of the noseband? And then on Tuesday, we talked about what is a correctly fitted noseband. And on Wednesday, we talked about noseband pressures. Are they constantly high? And had a discussion around that. And then on Thursday, we talked about, does the noseband type matter? There's a wide range of nosebands available for horse owners to use. So we just discussed the various discussions around noseband type. And then today we talked about, is the noseband the only thing we should consider? And the motivation for Noseband Week was really to try and share some of the information and to advance knowledge. And if you followed any of our webinars or our research, our work, we have a clear mission, and that is to advance knowledge across the globe. And there's one reason, and that is to improve the welfare of our horses. And that is the overarching passion behind everything we do. So we wanted to put on Noseband Week to really try and advance our understanding, our knowledge. And it's an area that we've been studying for, some time now. And you may have seen some of our publications and also some of the discussions around those publications. And of course, you may have some questions. So we wanted to put on this evening session. So please, if you have any questions, please do or post them in the comments box and happily answer those specifically related to what we've been sharing over the past few days. There's a few people from our international audience that couldn't make this evening and they have sent in some questions already, so I'll start with those, but please, if you do have any in the comments or questions that you want to discuss. And this is very much a relaxed environment, as you see, it's really just want to have a discussion to share our understanding, advance our knowledge, as I say. And so feel free, pop in anything in the comments box if you have any questions, and let's have that discussion. Let's discuss. So one of the questions you may have seen, May the 1st, which was yesterday, FEI introduced the new FEI measuring tool, noseband measuring tool. You may have seen that on our social media. We shared that. I have to say I am hugely proud of our research team for our contributions in small, but we have helped with various scientific publications that has brought to the fruition the use and application of the measuring tool. So it's a huge step forward what has happened yesterday, and it's also the collective work of other research groups around the globe and various discussions that have been had around the noseband. So one of the questions that came in is, where do you get a tool from? And just before people may say, I don't sell the tools, I have no commercial arrangement with the FEI or the tools themselves. I'm just simply a passionate scientist with an amazing team of researchers that have dedicated much of our time to trying to understand bridle noseband interaction. But where do you get a tool? Currently, they are being sold by the FEI, and again, I don't get any commission on any sales. There is talk of them going to national outlets. Certainly, if you're in the UK, that is quite advantageous because there is a hefty, cost for shipping. So FEI is where you can buy them at the moment. I'm sure that will change over time. And I think it's really important to say that it's strongly being urged to riders to buy them, to check the nosebands at home in training, and of course in competition. So have a look on the FEI website and go onto their shop, and you'll be able to access them from there. So again, just a reminder, if you just joined us, if you just joined us, welcome to this evening's Facebook Live talking about our Noseband week. If you have any questions, do post them in. A few questions have come in, and that's prior to this, so they're the ones I'm just going through now. One of the questions is what bridle would you recommend? Well, that is the $60 million question, and the answer is I can't recommend a bridle, but what I can say is that there are some bridle fitting principles, some ground rules that you really must consider. And I think I should really have said at the very beginning, I'm not a bridle fitter. As I said, I'm just a passionate scientist that loves data and trying to raise the knowledge base for the good of our horse. So I'm not a bridle fitter, but where was I going with that question? Oh yes, what's the bridle that what is the best bridle that I'd recommend? So my ground rules are, of course, we must consider the anatomy of the horse. And one of the things I think is really important is that bridle fit is actually considered equally as important as saddle fit. So working with your bridle and bit fitting professionals is a first step. What we're looking for from an evidence-based perspective is we've shown previously the influence that headpiece shape and design can have on equine locomotion. So ideally the headpiece needs to be shaped around the horse's ears or follow the horse's anatomy, lined with a material that can distribute the pressures, the forces, and preferably be a single band of leather that passes over the horse's head. And we really want to try and move away from having buckles across the horse's head, because that can induce focal pressures, localized pressures beneath. We need to be mindful of headpieces that have stitch lines or additional edges, ridges beneath the loaded area, because that of course can have pressure distribution or cause focal pressures. And I think we have to always keep remembering what is the function of what we're using, the equipment we are using, and the function of the headpiece is to carry the weight of the bridle. So what we're looking for is to distribute that pressure force over a greater area. So of course, as I say, the shape is important, but it's really important that that shape is in line with the horse's anatomy. And that's why I'm just being very, not cautious, but really trying to be advocate, going to talk to your bridle and bit fitting specialists about, ensuring it's the appropriate design for that horse. So in terms of headpiece, ground rules are shaped, lined with a material to reduce pressure, and preferably one piece of leather that passes over the horse's head to avoid focal pressures from buckles and straps, etc. So then we move on to the brow band, and of course that needs to be appropriately fitted, and do go back to the blog that we've had this week, and I talked about that there. Again, talk to your qualified bridle fitters. But one thing I do see when we're out on our biomechanical clinics, and again, just to emphasize, I'm not a qualified bridle fitter, but I'm a passionate scientist, is that the brow bands are, in my opinion, often too small, and they actually pull the headpiece forward, and what you can get is that the headpiece then pitches downwards and then pushes into the back of the horse's ears. And what I didn't say a minute ago is that the pressures are localized. We found repeatable pressures in the temporal mandibular joint region and base of ears, and these were stride related, so they're occurring every time, every stride. So just check that whilst you may have a all singing, all dancing headpiece, that your brow band isn't indeed too small and pulling the headpiece forward. So there's another consideration. And Then, of course, we need to consider the cheek pieces, and we're doing a research project at Hartpury University, and had the pleasure of working with two qualified bridle fitters, and I found it so fascinating around the cheek piece length and the positioning of the buckles. So they're also important to consider, that they're not too long, too short, altering the position of the buckle relative to the horse's eye. So again, they're things to consider. And then we come on to the noseband, which is, as I say, we did Noseband week. This is concluding Noseband week. The noseband needs to be fitted to the horse. Of course, there are an array of nosebands, and I really urge you to discuss your noseband selection with your coach, your bridle fitter, your bit fitter. And the noseband, of course, must be correctly fitted. We are certainly not supportive of nosebands that are restrictive or indeed are too tight, and where you see nosebands visually compressing the soft tissue. This, in my opinion, has no place in training or managing of horses, ridden horses. But as I have said on Monday, I think it was, the noseband does have a function. Sorry if you can hear my sausage dogs in the background. As I said, it's a very relaxed evening, but Princess Peggy is on fly watch at the moment, so you might just hear her jump across and something goes flying, but apologies. Anyway, so, the noseband does have a function, and when correctly fitted, and I think this is something that was really my motivation for this week, is just to try and I don't want to use the word educate, because that's not necessarily, the most appropriate word. Everyone knows, we know stuff, but maybe educate is the right word. But I wanted to try and just give a perspective and try and change some of the narrative around nosebands. And my personal view is that I think some of the narrative that we see, people have confused a correctly fitting noseband with ones that we see as being really tight and restrictive. The skin is flaring, or the nostrils are flaring, the skin is compressed. And I think people assume that's all nosebands, and in my opinion, that is not the case. And that's one of the studies we showed, that a noseband that is correctly fitted, the pressures are actually really quite low beneath the upper part and the lower part. And the noseband really does have a function. And I come back to this word function. We have to keep asking, what is the function? And the noseband can help stabilize the bridle. If you've been on any of my webinars, you'd have seen I've shown multiple videos of cheek pieces moving forwards, backwards, head pieces having left to right movement, because the noseband and the noseband cheek straps, as I say, they do act as a stabilizing, not restriction, stabilizing. And I think this is something we just have to be mindful of in terms of making sure that it is, correctly fitted, to able to stabilize the bridle. And then we come on to the bit, and I'm not going to go into the bit at all. That is not my area. It's something that hopefully we may get down to later, but from a scientific perspective, it's not something that I have looked at. But there are people that you can talk to about the appropriate bit for your horse, and of course being bridle and bit fit specialists. And I think one of the things I really want to get across is the use of equipment is not there to cover up training issues. And I think, if we are experiencing training issues, we have to ask why first before we go to the noseband or changing the bit. And I think that's something that we really must be mindful of. So I'm afraid, sorry, that was a very long answer to a very genuine question of what bridle would you recommend. I can't recommend an individual brand type, but I would recommend that your bridle conforms to those principles that I've mentioned. And the noseband, sorry, I should have added in, has again a material that is lined with material that can reduce pressure, is anatomically shaped. And I did put in the blogs around the attachment of the cheek piece to the noseband. I think this is really important. If you look at the Swedish noseband, which you may know as the crank noseband, this is something we want to... not want to change, but originally it was called the Swedish noseband, and it's unfortunately been adopted as the crank noseband because its leverage mechanism. Interestingly, if you've read one of our papers, and I see a questions coming about our publications, I'll come on to that in a moment, but if you've read one of the papers at the noseband adjustments, we found very little difference between the cavesson, the flash, and the Swedish noseband in terms of nasal and mandible pressures. So, if the noseband is correctly adjusted to the appropriate level of laxity, those pressures are fairly similar, and the pressures are fairly low when fitted correctly. And that's really important to say. And I think I really want to try and differentiate between a correctly fitting noseband and an incorrectly fitting noseband. And they are so different. And as I said earlier, I think I do worry that sometimes nosebands have just been blanketed as, oh my gosh, they are, compressing the skin and being mechanically restricting mouth activity. But actually the noseband, as I said, does have a function. And the other thing with the Swedish noseband is that there's a reasonable amount of padding over the mandibles. And I think this is something we've found high pressures on the mandibles and, of course, on the lateral aspect of the nasal bones. But the pressures were higher on the mandibles. And I ask you, where do you pad your noseband? And generally it's on the front. And I believe we should be actually considering padding on the mandibles over those bony prominences. So for me, that would be what I'd be looking for in my noseband design. So I hope that's answered your question. What bridle would you recommend? I can't give you a brand specific, but I would like you to consider all of those principles, but overall discuss this with your bridle fitter and try an array of different types of bridles. Okay, so I see a few questions have come in. Hey Russell, thanks for hosting this. Do you have any insight into the benefit lack of the flash and info around how tight it should be? In terms of the flash noseband, as I just mentioned there a moment ago, the pressures underneath the flash noseband, when adjusted to the same level of tightness, so let's say 2 fingers, 1.5 fingers, there was no difference between that and the cavesson and the Swedish noseband, the crank noseband. So in terms of that, we found no difference. However, I just add a big caution in here. We did not measure the pressures beneath the lower strap. And the reason we didn't do that is because our pressure mats are somewhat costly. And one of my colleagues, we were looking at this, and I turned around and the horse just had the corner of the mat in his mouth. And I was like, whoa, we need to not do that, unfortunately. So we don't have pressure, but we don't have any data relating to the lower part. So I can't give you that. And then in relation to how tight the noseband should be, we'll probably come on to that a bit more later, but when we looked at the different tightnesses, we went from 2 fingers, 1.5, 1, 0.5, and to 0 finger tightness. Studies were all ethically approved in accordance with all of our research, of course. And we found no difference between 2 or 1.5 finger tightness. Beyond that, the noseband values did increase, but even so, they were still fairly low. And I must just say, and this is something that has been perhaps confused in some of the social media commentary, our 0 fingers was just touching the skin, and that meant that the tool that we were using could not be admitted. So we were not compressing the skin, as I mentioned a moment ago. Those images we see where there's compression of the skin, we were not doing that. We were just touching the skin. To 1.5 finger tightness is where perhaps you want to be, and we found no change in the horse's blink rate or eye temperature at the noseband adjustments, and the horses were able to readily accept a treat when the nosebands were adjusted to those settings. So what is recognised organisation for bridle and bit fitters, similar to the SMS for saddle fitters? Yeah, now that's a really good question. The Society of Master Saddlers do have a bridle fitting qualification. There are other bridle and bit qualifications that you can access, and I just urge you just to go onto Google and just do a search, and you'll be able to access them. I could list them off, but I'm fearful that I may forget one or two. So in the hope of not doing that, then I urge you to just go and have a look at Google. So hopefully that's helped, and thank you for your question. Hang on. So please may I ask, for the modified noseband developed for the study, were extra pads either side of the edges of the nasal bone discussed, either as well as or instead of the central pad? Sorry, I just need to read that again. Please may I ask, for the modified noseband developed for the study, were extra pads either side of the edges of the nasal bones discussed, either as well as instead of the central pad? So I'm not sure which study you're referring to. If it's our current ones, we didn't modify the nosebands. We just used standard nosebands, Cavison, Swedish drop and a flash. If you're referring to our 2015 study, lead author there, Dr. Rachel Murray, where we did modify the noseband, and that modification was data informed in the sense that we found the pressures to be highest on the lateral nasal. So you'll see that those nosebands have semi-articulate in the sense that they take away the pressure or redistribute the pressure away from that area. So hopefully that is answered your question. If not, please post away again. Do you see bridle design changing as a result of the noseband studies? Have any bridle manufacturers expressed an interest in learning more? Okay, thank you. I'll take the first part. Do you see the bridle design changing as a result of the noseband studies? Yes, to a certain degree. I think yes. I think we're learning each day. We're learning something new to help improve the comfort of our horses. And I think, as I said a moment ago, the use of padding, I think we can really explore that further, as manufacturers already are. I think there's a scope for design of different nosebands, but it's beginning of the journey at the moment. And have bridle manufacturers expressed an interest in learning more? The short answer is yes. I think, as a scientist, one of the things I always want to be is curious. I want to keep asking questions. I want to keep turning the dial. And I'm really excited that some of the bridle manufacturers have. And I think going back to that 2015 paper, that really, the data from that, which a company has, been involved with, that's raised our understanding on bridle-horse interaction considerably. And I think that's, for me, where research really is so powerful, when it can inform designs, and with those new designs we can improve the comfort for our horses, and for me that's what makes me tick. That's my why. And of course the other side of research is having studies that can inform policy and decision making. I always said nearly 20 years ago, when I set out on this journey, I never wanted to be a researcher that had publications and they just sit behind a paywall that people can't access. My passion really is advancing knowledge for the good of the horse. So, that's really how we design our studies, high quality, to be able to fulfill that personal ambition of mine to inform designs of products for the good of the horse, but also to inform, to help guide policy and decision making. And, I'm not the only researcher doing this. As I said already, got a great team that's been working on the noseband work or bridle work, but there's also other research groups around the globe that have similar ambitions and are delivering and helping inform in different ways. So that's what's really quite exciting about the research world, generally anyway. So yeah, thank you for that one. So good questions coming in. Any other questions, please do post them in the, I was going to say the Q&A box, that's making me think I'm on Zoom, in the comments box. Any thoughts, any discussions on what I've said, anything you disagree with, please do jump in, that would be great. So I'm going to go back to the questions that came in throughout the day. Publications, where do you find them? Well, just in line with what I said a moment ago, my ambition or goal, motivation is to share knowledge. So we made a commitment as a research group to have our publications open access, and that means that anyone can read them. So you could go onto our website. That was an awful, shameful plug for our website, but it's www.centrebiomechanics.co.uk. And you can go on our scientific area and you can have a read of them, and you'll be able to read the whole manuscript. You can also go on to our university, Hartpury University, and look at Pure, and you'll find a whole load of publications there from myself and also my colleagues, and that would span a huge area of equine sports science and medicine and rehabilitation, and other areas, farming and sport. And you could always go to Google Scholar and have a look there, but generally they are, certainly the last 5 years are open access. Plastic bridles, are they better because they are lighter? Really good question, and being completely honest, I don't know the answer to that. I do have an answer. Do I have an answer or not? Let me just ponder this. As I said a moment ago, the headpiece carries the weight of the bridle, so the bit, the cheek pieces, the noseband, and we know we've looked at the effect that weight has on the headpiece pressures when we look at our double bridle study, which we've just published. We won't get into that tonight. Well, we can, but we won't. We cover that in probably a double bridle week down the line. So we do know that the additional weight does have an effect on headpiece forces. So yeah, potentially if it's lighter, one of the questions I would have, because I just don't know, so this is purely my opinion, is if we compromise stability and function. I don't know. And can you fulfill the padding requirements that I described earlier with the headpiece and the noseband? So good question, need to study it really. Do you think a lovely fitting bridle on a Highland pony would improve your love for them? Thank you for that question. Do I think that a lovely fitting bridle on a... No, is the honest answer. And they're fabulous ponies. I absolutely adore them. I have to go and get one of them in later on the foal. And it kicked me this morning. Eric's just got back and I told him it kicked me. I've got a little hematoma emerging on my foot. So no bridle would make me enjoy them any more than I currently do. No, I'm only joking. But thank you. Any other questions that are not related to Highland ponies? What are your thoughts on no noseband? That's always a question that comes up. And look, we don't have, from an experimental perspective in our, we don't have so much information at this. What I would say is just remember, go back to the function of the noseband, what I described, and an amazing vet told me a sentence, and I've lived by this sentence for some time. Russell, we have to be mindful of the unintentional consequences. And if you've seen me out and about, I apply that quite a lot. And I don't know, if you remove the noseband, fine. But you have to then be mindful, have you then created bridle instability? I don't know. We know that removing the noseband does increase bridle instability. So I would be fairly confident that, yes, when you remove the noseband, your bridle will become more unstable. So you need to be mindful of that. one of the things that I think is interesting is, and you know, I'm going to probably get shot down for this because people, the minute you talk about contact, people are like, oh no, the noseband's restricting the mouth, and like, no, that is absolutely not what I'm saying. We talked about that already with, you know, the mechanical restriction is so different to a noseband that's correctly fitting. But, you know, I'm a rider, as I'm sure you are too, that sometimes, you know, when you're riding, the horse, you know, has a biological movement and it separates its mouth slightly, not a lot. And under those conditions, when the mouth is separated, then there is low level, and the emphasis there is low level pressure applied by the noseband. And when the mouth is closed, the pressure is removed. So this is a pressure and release approach. And so my question or comment or observation, I should say, is actually that removing the noseband under those conditions, if the horse doesn't come against that low level pressure, does the horse then close the mouth, or does the horse open the mouth more widely? And they're the things I think we have to be really mindful of. And this is just personal observations, not scientific data. But I have seen a lot of horses that have been ridden without nosebands, and they have quite a lot of oral separation, mouth separation, and then the riders perform a movement. And my question is, and as I say, I don't know, but is then the rein tension values increased? And I think they're the sort of things I want this week to generate, is just be mindful of the unintentional consequences. If you remove the noseband, are you then at risk, not saying it'll happen, are you then at risk of increasing your rein tension? And I don't know the answer. One study did look at noseband tightness or looseness and rein tension, and they found that there was an increase in rein tension under those conditions, but we need more work in it. We did look at no nosebands, and we didn't find any change in horses' movement patterns with or without a noseband. So, you know, as I say, we need more work, but I think we just have to be careful at this knee-jerk reaction to nosebands. We'll just take it off. Well, what about if actually the noseband is fulfilling a perfectly acceptable function of bridle stability and supporting training? And there is one other thing, but I can't say it yet. That was a little tease for Noseband Week later in the year, if we get that far, because we're working on another project as we speak. So to answer your question, is no noseband better for me? I can't answer that, but I would really urge you to be mindful of the unintentional consequences. Do you think modern bridle designs are becoming unnecessarily complicated? The honest answer is yes. I think I would be in agreement with that. I was taught a very good saying many hundreds of years ago: keep it simple, stupid. And I also live by that too. And I think I really, from an evidence-based perspective, we have found the pressures to be lower when we, as I said, you know, use the anatomically shaped, lined with material, all what we discussed earlier. And I think if you conform to those principles, you're already advancing bridle fit and for the horse. I think sometimes we have a lot of marketing claims that say they do this and say they do that with no evidence, and it looks quite sparkly and fancy. But what is the function? What is the absolute function of that piece of adjustment on the bridle that claims to do something? What does it actually do? So for me, I would really stick to bridle fitting principles that are evidence-based and actually really conform to, you know, keeping it fairly simple, as we've already discussed. And they're not really simple, they've advanced on, but I think some manufacturers, some bridle designs are very complex. And as I say, I come back to the function. If you could change one thing about bridle fitting bridlery tomorrow, what would it be? Well, just to re-emphasize for those that have joined, I'm not a bridle fitter. I'm a passionate scientist, and trying to advance our understanding on bridle horse interaction, but with a specific focus of the last 3 or 4 years on nosebands. What would I change? Oh gosh, and I don't know if it's even around bridle fit. I think the one thing I'd really like to change, and I think this is really a general comment, is misinformation, and actually just, I think people are trying. So here's a scenario. I think people, I hope, and I feel really confident that people on the whole are trying to do a good thing. I don't think they're intentionally going out to do something bad. And I would like us to not have misinformation and not critique. I'd like us to educate these people that maybe there's a different route. And I have another saying. I'm very much about sayings, aren't they? I'm just reflecting on that myself. So I like to take people on the journey. And I hope the one thing I would change is that we can take people on the journey to do better for the horse. And I genuinely don't think that they're not trying to do better. But, today, to give you an example, I had someone on social media talking, where I shared a tack and equipment video, because I think it's really important. Let's get real here. There's an awful lot of noise on social media that's been really critical of our equestrian sports. And I'm not going to say that some of that criticism isn't warranted. Absolutely, we can do better, and if we can, we should. But some of that noise has become so toxic, actually. And I had one today, so I shared the tack and equipment video. Not tack and equipment. Yes, tack and equipment check at an international using the new Noseband tool. And one of the so using the Noseband tool, and then someone posted saying, "Oh God, they must hate the horse." And I just thought that was so unhelpful. And what do the riders and the support team that are absolutely, and having, work with athletes of all levels, we adore our horses. And, what must they think? And that would be what I would change, is misinformation, and try and hold our hand out and take people on the journey in a really positive, constructive way, instead of this. What it really does worry me is this approach we got on social media predominantly of just, you're wrong, you're awful, oh my God, how can you do that? That would be what I'd like to change. Not quite bridle fitting, but it does spread out to all sorts. Right, where was we need to get manufacturing away from pony cob full. None of these ever completely fit the head correctly. Yeah, and you'll be probably closer to that than me. All I can say is I think that I agree in the context that the horse's head anatomy is absolutely essential for correct optimal bridle fit. What I would say is, and I'm not a bridle fitter, so I don't know, so please do shoot me down in a very constructive, positive, taking me on the journey way, is that I think there's quite a lot of variations within different types. So I don't know if you can do a bit of mix and match, I don't know. But really, the bridle has to be fitted for the individual, of course. I believe it's also important to consider age, level of the horse when talking about nosebands, especially the stability question. What's your take on that? Of course, I agree. I completely agree. And I think in all of this, the horse always has to be at the centre of any discussions we have. So if we're considering changing the bridle, the headpiece, the saddle, let's chat with those that are informed and educated in that area and seek advice, whether that be your coach, your colleagues, your saddle fitters, bridle bit fitters, etc. So for sure. And, you know, in terms of what I think you're suggesting there is the younger horses that maybe have a little bit more activity, maybe the noseband, you take it off at older. We don't know. And I'm certainly not saying no noseband is good or bad. All I want people to do is reflect on the potential unintentional consequence of not having a noseband. And that may be fine, but ask the question. Don't just do it because you've seen these pictures where everything's compressed and it's really bad, because actually a correctly fitting noseband, in my opinion, based on evidence, has a place in riding. So mindful of the unintentional consequences, you've done a lot of work on saddle and rider interaction. Do you have any studies in mind to quantify the influence of the rider on the bit or the bridle? So can't really answer that question in detail for obvious reasons, because yes, ongoing. What I can say is we have started, and there's other groups, I really don't want to be the one people to think that we're the only group doing all this work. There are other groups doing stuff, so that's really important to look at their work too. But we did a study where we looked at rein tension and stirrup forces with Dr. David Marlin and the team at Woolcroft Saddlery and colleagues. And we looked at rein tension, and we were specifically looking at rein tension from, a rein tension perspective. Of course, that makes sense. Where was I going? Oh, yeah, that's it. And what we found was that there was an interesting... What we found was something quite interesting, that there was a variation in right-hand rein tension versus left. And then that got us thinking, is that down to the rider's laterality, handedness? And they're all things that keep me awake at night. I'm like, oh, we should do this study. Oh, we should do that study. I sleep with a little notebook by my bed because those little study ideas come in around between 2 and 4 in the morning. Anyway, so I think, we need to look more at bridle rider bit bridle interaction for sure, and that's something we're going to be working on over the coming years from our area of interest. But as I say, others are doing that, so do go to Google and have a look, put bridle horse interaction and see. We have a way to now measure noseband pressure. Is there a way of monitoring rein pressure? And this needs to be controlled, as very often they may have a loose noseband but very heavy hands. Yeah, and that's really what I was alluding to a moment ago, is we got to go back to the function of the equipment here, the noseband. And this is what I'm saying. If you loosen the noseband or remove the noseband and then have an increase in rein tension, is that what you're aiming for? I don't think so. So do we need to reconsider our options and, of course, consider our training? That's primary, improving the training of the rider, improving the communication between the rider, horse and rider. And I think sometimes horses just get confused. And I think that's where we as riders can take ownership of that and actually upskill ourselves as best we can, or as optimally as we can, so we don't confuse the horses. Is there a way of monitoring rein pressure? Yes. In our research group, we have rein tension devices which Dr. David Marlin operates. These are not really readily available for consumer use. They're very much a scientific tool. There are some systems that can measure rein tension, but I would just be cautious at those in terms of... why am I cautious of them? I'm cautious of them because, well, the ones we've used haven't worked very well, actually. So I'm cautious at spending money and then, you find they don't work a couple of weeks later. But rein tension is actually really a complex area to study. And it's complex because when a horse is just walking, the head and neck moves up and down, or in trot, in canter. So we see rein tension patterns, for example, just with a horse walking without a rider. And the complex part of it, is it the rider pulling the rein or is it the horse pulling the rein? And so hopefully there'll be some advances on that in the next couple of years, potential, maybe, hopefully not that long. So at the moment, there are a few systems. If you're going to use them, I would proceed with caution, and particularly around that interpretation. Because as I say, we don't quite know yet, is it the horse, is it the rider? It's a complex interaction between the two, and as yet we can't differentiate which direction it is. Yeah, but good question, thank you. So we're coming towards the end of this Facebook Live session. Again, this is concluding our Noseband week, and hopefully you found the interactions this week interesting. And as I said, it's really just to advance our understanding around matters around, well, was the noseband, but we talked also about the bridle. And of course, May the 1st saw the introduction of the new FEI noseband measuring tool. So if you have any final questions, please do pop them in the comments box. I've got a couple more that I will try and address in the time, but if you have any to share here, please do post them. Rain tension desperately needs to be controlled at competitions. Thank you. Yeah, good question. Again, I come back to the challenges of rain tension. And there have been studies done that have looked at simulated exercises, not in competition, but there was one that I don't think was published that looked at high-level riders doing various tests. Yeah, I agree, but I still come back to we've got to understand the rein tension within the stride. You know, quite often you see pictures selected when horses are in the down phase of a stride, particularly in canter when the horse pitches down, and then, you know, the rein tension, you know, may be different to when the horse is going up. So there's so many things we must think about as opposed to just a blanket rein tension. But I agree, that's something we want to look at. Talking of scientific tools like your rain gauges being used as a check for everyday riders, how do you currently approach the cheaper pressure mats which are now available? There are some people offering pressure checks with no knowledge of fitting. Yeah, good question. Good question. I'm really cautious. So this is really hard actually, and you've probably heard me say this before. I love data. I love tech. So I'm so sorry. That's Princess Peggy. Peggy. She's just trying to get the flies. Sorry. So I love data. Like, I'm a passionate scientist. I live, breathe, sleep data. I love gadgets. I love tools. I love kit. I love playing with stuff. But I'm really worried when it gets in the wrong hands, and misinterpretation of data can be really, really dangerous. And I am concerned with equipment that has been used in scientific studies being used by non-scientists, and misinterpretation of data is a really worrying thing for me. And I've seen some really awful situations where, as you mentioned, saddle pressures, where pressures have been obtained and they have violated all scientific protocols in how they've obtained them. And I'm not going to get into the details, but just simply, if you trot quicker one way versus the other way, you're going to change your saddle forces. And if you alter, you know, if you don't look at the directions, left, right, if you just come up with one figure, I just think it's very, very dangerous. So I hope that only systems that are really validated come with a ABC of how to use them and interpret them, supported with a support system online. I think that's, for me, the way forward, as opposed to these cheap systems that people can access. And the reason I say that is because my passion is for the good of the horse. And I think whilst, again, we're trying to, you know, I believe everyone's got the good intentions, I think sometimes using those systems can actually give us wrong information, which can be a bit of a problem. From a scientist perspective, what is the biggest issue that stops progress of huge studies into bridle saddle welfare being put into common practice? I think, being completely honest, one of the big issues is funding. I reflected, yesterday was a really interesting day because, as I said a few times, there'd been quite a shift in rules and regulations. That a tool now is being used at FEI competitions to check the tightness of the noseband. And as I said, our studies have contributed to that, but other research groups have also contributed to that previously, and certainly with the discussion around that. So one of the challenges, so that's what I was saying, when Professor Hilary Clayton and I were chatting, I think now 4 years ago, and, we really wanted to do a high-level bridle horse noseband study. And, we've published papers with pressure, so let's look at the pressure maps and pressure mats. And, the cost was, so high. And I remember fondly scrambling around trying to get the money just to get these 2 mats. And then when I say, saw a horse chewing a corner of it, I was like, oh no. So, funding has been a challenge, is a challenge, certainly with the global climate at the moment. So that's one of the biggest issues we have. And I think the other issues is actually within our scientific community. I think together we can move, if we can collaborate across the globe with different research groups, I think we can actually cover the ground probably a bit quicker. I think that's something that certainly I want to try and do over the next couple of years, is to work with other groups in different countries. We've got an amazing group here, but I think other groups can offer something, we can offer those groups something, and then together you can you start to make other magic happen. So that would be probably one of the other things that I would, the international, multi-country, multi-centre studies would be phenomenal to get to. But I think things are being put into practice. We've got great relationships, myself and my colleagues. And again, I keep referencing other researchers because it's important that there's a lot of people trying to do good studies to help advance the knowledge base. But I can only talk from our group. All of us have got good connections, relationships with key stakeholders. We are always driving to advance the knowledge and push that information out so people can embed it into practice. And as you've seen with the tool yesterday, that's the work of many years. So I think it is being put into practice. The trouble is, research just takes a long while. If you ask my other half, Eric, he'll vouch for how many hours it takes to, I think one meeting we had, we were 4 hours chatting about a paragraph, but, really from start to finish, it's up to 5, 6, 7 years easily. Time is another challenge, but it is what it is. So we are coming towards the end. I'm going to close this at 2000 hours London time, 8 o'clock. If there are any final comments, questions, please do post them in. I just have a couple more questions that came in. Bit ring size, does that affect the noseband? Yes. And we need to be mindful of the noseband height on the horse in relation to the cheek of the facial crest. 1 to 2 centimeters approximately. You can visualize this with your fingers. What we need to be mindful of, it's not so high that you're putting pressure on the facial crest. And also there is an outlet beneath the infraorbital foramen. We've got to be mindful there of not having the noseband passing over that, although, as I said, correctly fitting the noseband. What you could do is tomorrow put your noseband on. First of all, check all what we've discussed, check the tightness, get yourself a gauge, 1.5 fingers or the FEI tool beneath the noseband, or looser if you wish. Just visualize that in a horse that is static, the noseband should just fall off. It's got no real contact with the horse. It should just fall off. And I'll put a video up of this in the next couple of weeks. So, we just need to think about the height of it. Back to the bit rings. I was getting sidetracked there, sorry. is if the noseband is too low, or it's appropriate but you've got big bit rings, then it's going to interact with the noseband, so you need to be mindful of that. And again, I go back to let's chat with our bridle fitters. They'll be best placed to see that, but yes, it will have an effect, so again needs to be considered. Will my fly bonnet affect the fit of my bridle noseband? Really good question, especially coming into beautiful weather here at the UK at the moment. The answer is yes, and we did preliminary data on this 100 years ago now, and we should have published it, and maybe we will, I don't know. We've got about 15 different papers on the go at the moment, but actually, no, I'm not having that on record. We're not going to publish it because it's not a priority at this stage. But we have pilot data, and we looked at the pressures beneath the headpiece with the fly bonnet. And remember, I said the pressures are focal pressures at the temporal mandibular joint and base of the ears. So with your fly bonnet, what you need to check is that you don't have any braiding that passes beneath the headpiece. If you do, then you've created a line of pressure. And you need to also consider that the fly bonnet actually fits the horse's ears. And the number of times I see fly bonnets that are too small and the tips of the horse's ears are being compressed or tilted forwards or whatever. So that's something to be mindful of. And the other thing to be mindful of is that by the additional layer of the fly bonnet, you've raised the bridle up. So you've altered the positioning of what was perhaps a correctly fitting noseband. That's now gone up slightly. And of course, you've altered the position of the bit in the horse's mouth. That's also gone up slightly. So yes, you need to consider the fit of the bridle post or when you're wearing the fly bonnet, and potentially be ready to adjust. I must just say, in the study we did in 2015, we found that when we reduced these pressures, this influenced gait. So these high pressures that we found beneath the headpiece, the noseband, due to design, had an effect on the horse's locomotion. And I think that's something to be really, really mindful of. I keep coming back to function, but we don't want to disturb the horse's natural biomechanics or the horse's biomechanics locomotor system. And that's why it's so important that when we're looking at stuff like the bridle, the noseband, we check, is it correctly fitting? And I think we're now gathering a body of evidence that can really support correct fitting from an evidence-based perspective, because we know that it has an effect on the global locomotor system. So just keep that in mind. Drop nosebands. You haven't talked about drop nosebands. No, apologies. That hasn't come up tonight, but it is a question that came in. Interestingly, we found the drop noseband had lower pressures than the Cavesson, the Swedish, and the flash noseband, and largely due to its positioning. But we didn't measure the lower mandible pressure, the chin pressures, for the reasons of the mat. So just mindful of that. We don't know that yet, but it did have lower pressures. But I'm mindful of its positioning. But you must keep the individual horse absolutely at the front of all of these discussions. We need to design a fly bonnet that fits over the bridle rather than under. Thank you so much, Russell. So interesting as always. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I agree. We need to consider that. That's not in my skill set at all. I'm not very good at sewing or what have you. But yeah, something for somebody to do, and then we'd have a look at it. So that has brought us up to the hour. I hope that this hour on noseband bridle horse interaction has been useful. And please do follow us on social media. Let's try and take people on the journey, and let's try and advance the knowledge base across the globe. And hopefully that if someone asks you some questions around nosebands and the fit and the tightness, you can give some information that is evidence-based, and ultimately the goal is to help our horses improve the comfort of all of our horses. So I thank you for joining, and please, like I say, follow us on social media. We've got several more papers coming out. If you found Noseband Week interesting, just post a comment for us, because then we might do another week for another piece of equipment, and followed by another Facebook Live session. It's the first time we've done this, but we felt really passionate that we wanted to just get some information out as best we can. And so until next time, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to go and find this Highland pony, well, full. You'll hear more on that later on, I'm sure, and see if I can go and get a kick on the other foot, because that's what it did on my left foot. So I just need to go and match it up with the right foot, because I have an asymmetrical gait now because of the Highland pony. Anyway, thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye for now.